Hello, movie lovers. Welcome back to SignaTeek channel. Today is all about fresh cinema experiences, and I can't wait to share my thoughts on the newest filmmaking its mark. Sit back, relax, and let's dive into the recap of this exciting cinematic adventure. The story begins in 1905 in Cork, Ireland, where a British soldier named Percy Fawcett was holding a deer hunting competition with many other soldiers. He managed to win the hunt. That night, Percy and his wife arrive at the party that is the climax of the hunting tournament. Among the soldiers of his rank, he was the only one without medals. People felt sorry that such a great soldier as him came from a family with a bad reputation. In March 1906, Percy prepared to leave for London for the Royal Geographical Society. When Percy arrived in London, he contacted Sir George Goldie directly, director of the Royal Geographical Society. He had heard a lot about him as he was often sent to many places, and he explained that only a small part of Bolivia was mapped. In April 1906, Percy's journey to the Amazon began. On board, he met Henry Coston, who served as her lieutenant. She was a little mad because Percy had been on the same ship for a week without introducing himself to her. Coston said he just wanted to see if Percy was ready to explore. Percy then tells him that his reputation as a man depends on the success of this mission. During their train journey, they were given the task of mapping the Verde River, an important part of the border between Bolivia and Brazil. To make a long story short, in July 1906, they finally reached eastern Bolivia, an area that had never been mapped. Shortly thereafter, they arrived at Jacobina's Fazenda Opera House, where they met a young corporal named Manley. Manley tells Percy that he has received a message from a border committee asking him to cancel the reconnaissance mission as it is too dangerous as the war is escalating. Percy asked Manley to send a reply message stating that he would not be withdrawing from the mission. He asked Mr. Manley to find local people to act as guides. Manley tells him that he needs to buy an Indian slave from a baron, the owner of the plantation. He tells the baron that he wants a slave to guide him through the Amazon forest, but the baron's men say that no one will ever return from there. The next day, their group set out with 3 large rafts and 4 horses. On the way, they found a small German ship. Someone was on the boat. They were about to ask the person, but were suddenly attacked by a group of tribesmen inland. One of them was hit by an arrow and fell into the river. Percy and his friends quickly jump into the water to avoid the attack, but it turns out that the Verda River is full of piranha fish. Percy and Kirsten manage to climb onto the raft, but one of them gets his body caught in the net and is swallowed by a pilon and dies. The next day, they continued their exploration. They ran out of food. One of them started losing his mind after trying to survive in this state for quite some time. I didn't even know if they would make it back safely. To make a long story short, they finally arrived upstream. They were very happy to be able to reach places that no one had ever touched before. But at this point, the Indians who were leading them decided to flee. They were not surprised, since the man's job was simply to get them there. Then they tried to go into the forest. Percy shoots a boar, which gives him food to take home. Along the way, Percy also found many pottery shards, all the while believing that what his guide had said was true. They only knew that the place had never been visited by humans, but it turned out that only white people had not yet arrived there. Percy convinced her that there must be a settlement deep in the forest. Her mission to track the Verda River has been completed. They immediately started heading home. Percy was welcomed with great joy by the British people. He was considered Britain's greatest explorer. On February 6, 1911, Percy informed a number of dignitaries about the expedition. He said the Amazon is more than just a vast tropical rainforest. It is also home to a civilization that may have been the ancestor of the region's people. His opinion surprised everyone. To prove it, Murray asked him to go on another expedition with him. Percy happily accepted the challenge, and so did Kirsten. Long story short, Percy, Kirsten, Manley, Murray, and several others, he finally began his expedition in May 1912. During the trip, Murray seemed very tired and said his backpack was too heavy, so he threw away some things he didn't need. Shortly after, they were attacked by a group of interior tribes. This was a new experience for Percy. He forbade anyone to fire. He sings the Queen's soldiers to Manley's instrument and stops the attack. Then he tried to approach the tribesmen. After they were deemed harmless to the tribesmen, he called on his friends to accompany him to the settlement. The tribal chief welcomed them as guests. Murray realized that it was a cannibal tribe and refused to join. Eventually, Murray said goodbye and the others went to see the chief. Percy asked the chief about an old inhabited city deep in the forest. The chief replied that he had heard rumors about his town but was not sure, but he said he would have to go further upstream to find someone who could help him. I did. He then showed how inland tribesmen hunt fish in rivers and settle on plantations without destroying nature. He was ashamed of modern people who think that inland tribes can't do anything. But the truth is that they were further along than they expected. They continued their journey and found Murray lying in the woods. Murray ran out of food. She gets angry because Percy says he trusts the kids more than Murray. The river current was very strong when they were on the boat. Percy tells Murray to stay in position to keep Ruff balanced, but instead he moves and drops one of the food baskets. When the Ruff hit a rock, Manly fell into the river. Percy told him to swim to the edge. Moments later, Murray also falls into the water, and Percy orders him to swim to the edge as well. But instead, Murray gets caught on the side of the raft, causing it to lose its balance. Another food basket fell, and Percy finally let go of Murray's raft. Manly then helped Murray swim to the riverbank, and they stopped and huddled together. 2 food baskets were lost in this incident. Percy was very angry that Murray didn't cooperate at all. Murray's injury worsened. He continued his chit-chat, saying that everything that happened to him was Percy's fault. This time, their journey was slowed down by Murray. After discussing Murray's condition, they agreed to send him home. Percy asks Murray to go to the miners' camp south of the river. He provided food, gave him his last horse, and had a local man guide him home. Percy explained that given his condition, he could not allow Murray to risk the group's safety. But instead of Murray being grateful, he says that Percy doesn't care about him. After Murray left, they were very surprised to see that Murray had sabotaged their food supply. Like it or not, they had to go home soon. Percy urges them not to give up without getting something, but when they are told they won't have enough food for another week, they decide to abandon the expedition. After returning home, Percy had already given birth to her 3rd child, a daughter named Joan. She was very grateful that Percy had a wife who could raise her children well. A few days later, Percy and his expedition arrived to attend a meeting of the Royal Geographical Society. Mr. Murray also attended the meeting. He tells the club director that Percy has left him. Percy denies this and says he gave them the supplies. In this situation, a strategy had to be implemented to save everyone's lives. Mr. Murray said he spent all his time on the trip with the wild tribes and saw no trace of the lost city. Percy then blames Murray for not reaching his destination. Kirsten also said Murray had interfered with her care, but Murray said with an innocent look on her face that she had been cheated. He said Kirsten and Manly were disgusting and untrustworthy. Kirsten was very upset when she heard this. He said Murray should have been left for dead in the woods. The club director ended their discussion. Murray then stated that if Percy was willing to admit his mistakes in front of all members of the society and in the presence of his own wife, he would consider all problems resolved. But Percy denied making a mistake. Percy then left the club. When he returned home, his wife told him that the former sergeant had to give his name to the War Office, meaning that Percy would be immediately going to war. Jack was always angry at his father for leaving his family. His father had just returned from an expedition, but he had to leave again for the war. Percy tried to explain that it was his duty to serve his country. Jack then asked what a father's duties were to his wife and children. Jack said that his father had no regard for his family at all, and that he had failed in his reconnaissance mission. Percy was so overcome with emotion that he unconsciously slapped Jack. Later, Percy's wife helps Jack, and she explains that what his father did was for his own benefit. 2 years later, Percy and his army are sent to the front. At this point, Percy's men informed him that Murray had been pursuing an Arctic expedition with the Canadians, but had since abandoned the expedition. This news proved how cowardly Murray is. At this time, a clairvoyant from Russia arrived at the barracks. Everyone was interested in the future predictions of the respected Major Percy. The psychic said that what Percy was looking for was far more than he could have imagined. Until he found this place, his soul would never find rest. It was his destiny to find it. On September 26, 1916, Percy and his army prepared to advance. He appealed to the military to fight for his loved ones and those who fought alongside him on the battlefield, but unfortunately, he was shot dead during the attack. Luckily, he was still alive. He had a wound that affected the nerves in his eye, but doctors said he would still survive. He was advised never to explore again. Percy was very saddened to hear this because discovering this lost city was his biggest dream in life. In 1923, Percy retired from his country's service. A journalist comes to him and says that a reader wants to know where Percy has been since the war ended. Percy replied to the journalist that he can tell readers that he is recovering and adjusting to life at home. One day, Jack was seen chasing rabbits and practicing shooting. Percy walks up to him, and she hands him the necklace she got from the Green tribe. Jack then asks if his father still believes in the lost city. Percy just nodded. It turns out that Jack wanted to go on an expedition with his father to find the lost city. She refused because Percy felt he was too old for her. Jack then said that the Americans would scout the area with weapons. They couldn't just hope that the lost city wouldn't be destroyed. Jack tells him he has to find it and save the place before the Americans do. Percy eventually agreed, but Jack had to get his mother's approval first. In the middle of the forest, they met another group of Indian tribes. They marched a considerable distance and eventually encountered another group of Indian tribes who rescued them. They were taken to a residential area. The local tribe performed a ritual for the two. At that moment, Jack thought he was going to die in this place. Percy then said that many of the world's secrets were unknown, but the two went on a journey to give them meaning. After that, the two simply followed everything the local tribe did to them. Years later, Percy and Jack never returned. Percy's wife goes to the club director, and she tells him that there is a Brazilian who says she saw Percy and Jack living with the local tribe. The club director urges them to accept the reality of what happened to Percy and Jack. More than 100 personnel were dispatched to search for them, but to no avail. Then she gave him something that the man had confessed. It was the compass that Percy showed him before he set out on his expedition. This meant that it was probably true that Percy and Jack found the lost city and decided not to return. At the end of the film, it is announced that Percy's faith in the lost city has been the subject of ridicule for almost a century. But in the early 20th century, archaeologists discovered an astonishing network of ancient roads, bridges, and agricultural settlements along the Amazon forest. The place Percy suggested was the lost city of Z. And the movie ends here. Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed this film recap and want more, subscribe now, like, and share captivating stories with your friends. Tell me which movie you'd like me to summarize next. See you soon.